Hello everybody, this is Graeme Anderson, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called 11. Now, a quick bit of background. I played football or soccer most of my adult life until I hurt my knees. I watched the English Premier League for many years and still follow it today. So when I saw a game based on football, I was very excited to get this one. Now, there have been a few games on the same theme in the past that have been less than stellar, but this one looks so good. I should also say I don't normally buy expansions, especially when I first buy a game. But I knew I was going to enjoy this game so much that I actually broke my own rule and got an expansion when I bought this game. So hopefully that was a good idea. Now, the game takes place over 6 weeks. Each week is spent, managing your team, hiring players and staff, selling players, training your players, managing your players on the field. Then at the end of the week, there's going to be a match day. We're going to be playing a match against one of the teams in your division and hopefully moving up the league table. This sounds like this will be my perfect style of game. The main mechanism is, to me anyway, resource management. You get resources based on your stat levels and you have to carefully manage them, manage them all. There's no point in spending all your money on players if they can't play. Hiring staff or upgrading your stadium would definitely get you abilities, but you have to pay them at the end of each week with your limited resources. Now, I realize I may have set this bar a little high in my mind for this game, but I was excited to get this one to the table. But will it be a game worthy of the Premier League? Or it's going to be at the bottom of the table in the relegation zone? Let's get to the table, see how it's played, then we'll come back to my final thoughts on 11. So here's 11 set up for 4 players. I'm only showing a 1-player setup, and I'll be not going into all the details here, just giving you an overview of how the game works. The cards are set up so you have the veterans and youngsters, along with the normal players. All player cards have a trained and untrained side. In the display, they're always going to be the untrained side up. Next, you have the staff cards, which you can hire for an action. Next, you have the staff cards, which you can hire, then the advertisers cards. The board meeting deck is shuffled and placed face down, along with the objective deck and the tactics deck. All the stadium upgrades and all other token components are placed off to one side. Each player takes 3 boards: the stadium board, the club board, and the match board, along with the components of their color. Place the stat markers on 2 on each resource track. Then each player is dealt 4 director cards and they're going to be drafting 3. That is, pick 1 and pass the rest to the right. When you get down to 2 cards, pick 1 and discard the other. Then place the directors on your board. If the director gives you a bonus, you apply it now. They might also give you a feature, which is an ongoing ability, or they might just give you an action you can perform on your turn. I'll talk a bit more about the dice along the director's cards later on. Each player is also dealt 1 random starting trainer to be placed under their club board. The division cards are the teams you're going to be playing during the game. Decide on a division and take the appropriate cards and deal them to each player. The 3 harder cards go on the bottom and the 3 easier on top. Next, each player is dealt 1 youngster and 1 veteran to start their team, and they're placed in the appropriate section of the match board. Place all your jerseys on the field, and flip any matching tokens from your player cards to their appropriate side, either defense or attack, and make sure they're in their correct spot. For the rest of the jerseys, you flip them all over so you have the equal number of defense and attack, so you're going to end up with 5 attack and 5 defense, and you're going to have 3 leftover jerseys. Finally, each player gets 2 objective cards, keep 1 and discard the other. Anytime during the game you've achieved your objective, reveal it and collect that many VP. You're also going to receive a basic tactic card. Finally, they're going to get their die and place their maintenance markers on the appropriate spots. Normally you start with 2 players, the youngster and the veteran, 4 stadium upgrades, which are printed on the board, and 1 staff card, which is your beginner trainer. The league table is placed off to one side, and each of the players' shields, plus all the shields of the other teams that are in your division decks. Now the game is played over 6 weeks. Each week consists of 5 days, culminating in a match with the top division card on your match board. At the end of the game, you're going to be scoring points from the victory markers gained during the game. You'll get points for the hired staff and stadium and office upgrades, and finally, your position on the league table. So let's talk through a round. Mondays are always the same. Game resources based on your resource markers, and you're going to take them from supply again based on your stat marker. Next, each player takes a board meeting card and rolls their die. They will compare the rolled number to all of your 3 directors. Whichever color is the most prominent for that number that you rolled is the decision your directors will make. Now at any time you can spend one of your red resources to re-roll the die. Next we go to the Tuesday through Thursday, and they're identical. Each player takes 1 basic action per day. They can hire a player or youngster, sell a player or youngster, hire staff, contract a sponsor, build stadium infrastructure or an office, or use a card ability. You can always spend 2 green resources to take an additional card action. Each card can only be used once per week, and the green resources can only be used to perform a card action, not any of the other basic actions. So let's go through the basic actions. You can hire a player or a youngster. Their cost is in the top left of the card. You can only ever hire the first 3 players in the row or the top youngster. The player cards will show you the cost to hire, if they're a defender or attacker, where in the field they must be placed, their strength, their jersey number, and finally the effect that they have, plus any effect cost that must be spent to use that effect. Now, not all cards will have an effect. Player cards can always be trained, that is, flipped to their other side, but this is usually only done through an action of another card, like your trainer card. The other side might have altered stats, and they may increase or decrease the strength. Whenever you get a new player, remember to increase your maintenance track. Then place your player in their spot on the field with a matching jersey flipped to the appropriate side. If you don't have a matching number, you're going to be using one of the blanks. Now, after the initial setup of the jerseys, the only way these jerseys are flipped between attacking and defense is through hiring new players. You can quickly end up with a team that is more defensive or more attacking. If as an action you want to sell a player or a youngster, discard that player card and gain 2 money plus money equal to their current power. If the player is ever injured or suspended when you sell them, and we'll talk a bit more about that later, you will only get half of the money. Another action you can do is hire staff. You can only, again, hire one of the first 3 staff members. Their cost is in the top left corner. Increase your maintenance track for the staff and add them to your player board. They will always have a profession, an effect, and maybe a cost to use that effect. Across the bottom are their victory points for having sets of the same profession. At the end of the game, you'll score points according to the number of each staff card you have for each set. Another basic action is to contract a sponsor. You can take one of the first 3 sponsors, and then you get a choice of which sponsorship deal you want to give. The first is just an in-stadium announcement. You get the reward and discard the card. The next is a stadium board or an advertisement board, and you can only have a few of these based on your stadium. If you pick this type of sponsorship, you either get the bonus listed or you get the additional white bonus that's written. Whichever you take, you slide the card into your unused banner and add place on your stadium board. The last option is the t-shirt sponsor. You can only ever have one of these for the entire game. You get both the bonus listed on the t-shirt and the additional bonus. Then you flip the card over and place it in the t-shirt section of your board. The Build Stadium Infrastructure or Office Basic action allows you to purchase a stadium upgrade for €3 and place it into the appropriate spot and get the benefit, while also making sure to increase your maintenance track. Or you can upgrade your office. Pay the price on the space above where your marker is and move your marker up once. This does not count as a stadium upgrade, so you don't need to move up your marker for purchasing an office upgrade. The last basic action is to perform an action from one of your cards. Pay any cost associated with the action and turn your card 90 degrees. Each card's action can only be used once per week. So that's the one half of the game. The end of the week is when you're going to be having match day. You're going to be reading the scouting report on the team you're going to be playing. You're then going to be playing a tactic card and it will show you the setup of your players and move your jerseys around so that they match the formation you've chosen while making sure not to violate your players' positions. In other words, you can't move a defenseman up to being an attacker. For each of your players that has a matching card, you must play 1 blue resource for them to play in this match. Any players with an injury or suspended cannot play. Some players have additional effects that can be used. You must allocate resources to that ability before the match starts. Other players have mandatory actions that must be resolved when indicated. Next, you can discard 1 injury or 1 suspension token from each staff or player that has them. Resolve any before the match abilities for your players. You can now assign your red resources to the stands. Each stand can hold 1 red resource. These are your fans. After the match, for each fan assigned, you're going to receive €1. These assigned red resources cannot be used for anything else, so you can't use them to reroll a die, for example. Now you must resolve the match, and I'm going to skim through very briefly for this part. You're going to reveal your opponent's card. It will show you how they're lined up with each of their players' strengths. You can now play an additional tactic card if you have one that has an effect on it, and if you want to use any of your players' abilities that has a resource on it, you do it now. Next, you're going to go through the 5 sections comparing your teams versus the opponents and pair off each player. The 5 sections are the left and right wing, then the central forwards, midfielders, and central defenders. For each section, you're going to pair off one of your players to one of your opponent's players. Basically, attackers versus defenders. Compare the strength of each player, and for any generic jerseys that you have that don't have a player card, they're always a strength 1. If the strength of the attacker is greater than that of the defender, they're going to score a goal. If there are more attackers than defenders, those extra attackers will automatically score since they're not defended against. And you always do the pairings so that the fewest number of goals are scored. For each side that scores, you're going to move the marker. Your goalkeepers are a little different. If an attacker goes through their defense person, you're going to then match the goalkeeper strength versus the attacker who got through. If the goalkeeper strength is greater, they could stop the shot. Now, the goalkeeper can only stop a certain number of shots throughout the game. It's going to depend on the number of hand symbols on their card. If you don't have a goalkeeper card, you have a default goalkeeper who has the strength of 1 and can stop 1 shot during the match. Now once the match is done, you resolve any after the match effects on your player cards. Move each team's crest on the league table. 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, and 0 points for a loss. Then discard the fans from the stands and gain the corresponding number of euros. Discard any blue tokens from your players. This would be temporary strengths or weaknesses, but any yellow token stays. These are permanent strengths and permanent weaknesses. You then do a match consequence roll. Roll your die, and depending on if you win, lost, or drew, you apply the appropriate result. Now you can always use a red resource that you have left over to re-roll this die. If you are required to apply an injury, roll the 12-sided die and place the injury token on the matching player card. If there's no matching player card, nothing happens. Finally, for each opponent team that did not play during this match day, roll the matching die and move their crest on the league chart. Finally, the week has ended. Unexhaust all cards, move your score markers back to 0, and discard your opponent card. If there are none left, you're going to go to end of game scoring. Otherwise, you're going to check position of each of your maintenance tracks and pay the appropriate number of euros for each track. For every euro you cannot pay, you must put 2 suspension tokens on a staff card. Next, discard the rightmost cards from the display and fill up to the left. You can only keep a maximum of 1 red, 1 green, and 1 blue resource for the next round, but you can keep all of your yellow euros. Pass the round marker to the next player and start the next week. If, instead, the game is over, and you've done your 6 matches, you're going to total up your points. You're going to get points for the position on the league table, add any VP tokens gained through your youngsters or any other cards. You're going to get points for the sets of staff card according to their values across the bottom. Any built stadium infrastructure will give you points. You're going to add your position on the office track if you're able to upgrade that, and then you lose 1 point for every suspension card you have left on your cards. And the player with the most points is the winner. Now I do want to stress that I have skipped over an awful lot of details in this overview. There are many little rules that I have left out. But with that, let's get back to the table to see what I thought about 11. So, theme and components. First off, the theme. I felt it really lived up to my expectations in this count. This is a team management game where you're covering everything from the stadium to the staff to the players. I liked that I actually had my own players. Their jerseys on the field were represented by the players I had hired, and hiring new players had a direct influence on my formation, how well it worked. I just thought the entire theme was well integrated into the gameplay and ended up being a theme that I really, really enjoyed and worked extremely well for the game. If I was to stop the review right here, this game would get a 9 out of 10 easy. I love the theme. The components, in my mind, were a mixed bag. This is definitely a table hog. Each player has one of these three of these boards, which are fairly large. The player boards themselves are fairly thin, almost like paper, but they're still a good quality, a little bit of plastic to them. The cards are good quality. The wooden tokens are pretty standard and work well for what you need them for. I thought the art was very nice and definitely helped with the cohesive theme of the game. I do wish the game was not so much of a table hog, as I do think these player boards definitely could have been smaller, but I do like what you got. Now the rulebook. If you watch my overview, you'll see that it was rather long, even with me skipping over a fair number of little rules. It's because this rulebook is almost 30 pages long. Yes, there are some good illustrated pictures in the book, but I'm still not sure why this game has so many rules for such a pretty straightforward game. The main actions you're doing are pretty standard, and I think that's maybe where I started to see the cracks in the game for me. So with that, let's talk about the gameplay of this one. And again, it really is a game of two halves. There's the Monday through Thursday actions, which for the most part I enjoyed. The Monday morning board meeting cards were at first interesting, but seeing how swingy they were, we all kind of started to dread them. Based on your die roll, you can't you can't use your staff cards this week, or you lose one of your money stat lines, so you're making less money each round. Yes, you can spend fans to re-roll your die, but come on, for a game where you get so few basic actions, these cards seemed a little harsh. I did like the theme on them, I didn't like the consequences of them. Now, the Tuesdays to Thursdays is really where my enjoyment of the game came into play. Managing all my resources and planning for the game end was definitely fun. Yes, I want it all. I want the best players, the flashiest stadium, and the best staff. But I do have to pay for them at the end of the week, so that push and pull was a lot of fun. Planning out the week of what needed to be done was also enjoyable. That's not to say it's without its flaws. I found after a while that some of the resources were definitely more advantageous than others. Your fans, the red resources, you can put in stands and use for rerolls. So how many do you actually need? You can only have a maximum of 4 stands, and how many rerolls are you going to need for out the week? And the operation resources, the green ones. They're used by some of your player cards sometimes, and they're used to perform those extra card actions, but most of the time I had more than what I needed. The budget, the yellow ones, were another thing entirely. You need them for so many actions. You spend so much of your time figuring out how you're going to get more. Sell players, get a sponsor, put your fans in the stands. And those fitness markers, the blue ones. Without them, your players are not playing. And there's very few ways to get that fitness stat marker up. Most of the time I ended up with the same stat marker at the beginning as I did at the end of the game. So I enjoyed for the most part the first part of the week. Then we hit the match day. This is one of the parts of the games I really did not enjoy. You read a vague scouting report and you line up your players based on your tactic cards, and you're often only playing with one tactic card for the entire game. And just hope for the best. Flip the card over. Oh, they have 3 attackers in the midfield and you have no defenders. Oh well, you guessed wrong. Then there's the resolving of the match just plain tedious, and there's not much of a game here. You can't change formations, you can't substitute players, you just have to sit there and do the 5 sections. Then there's all these before and after match card actions, but you have to make sure you allocated the proper resources. The rules for match day take up 5 pages in the rulebook. For what? Once it starts, it's just on rails. I would have preferred, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, just roll a die. The players would give me modifiers or something, but I really did not enjoy this part of the game. There has to be a cleaner, simpler way to resolve all the matches on match day. You know, your matches and all the other division teams. Nobody I played with enjoyed this part of the game. I also felt that the game really worked best at lower player counts. At 2 is probably where I had my most enjoyment from the game, but even then I still had the same frustrations with it. So would I recommend this game? No, I would not. For me, it was a disappointment. I liked parts of the game, but felt overall there were just too many rules and the randomness seemed to be out of whack with the rest of the game. Now, I absolutely love the theme. I liked how the game flowed from the board meeting to the weekday actions to match day. I liked the variability of the different directors that you can draft at the beginning of the game. They would definitely change up the way you approach your game. The different clubs to compete against also varied it up as well. I also really enjoyed the basic actions and the balancing of your resources in that Tuesday through Thursday actions. I also really liked the components, for the most part. Maybe a little too big, but still nicely done with fun little touches, like the t-shirt sponsor section. For me though, the cons just outweighed the pros for this one. I did not like all the little fiddly rules for this one. There seemed to be too much overhead for what the game actually was. I mean, you have 5 face-up cards to hire from, but you can only pick the first 3. Then why put 5 out? Why just have the deck face up so you can see the cards that are coming up? And for the rare cards you have that allow you to purchase any of the 5, why just tell the person to drop the top 5 cards from the deck? And the resources just felt unbalanced, where some were clearly more important than others. Now, I could live with these little annoyances because of how much I enjoyed the theme, but the match day just killed it for me. I found match day was just pointless and way too long for what it was. Since all the other actions in the games are quickly resolved, this day just grinds the game to a halt for no real benefit. I agree there needs to be a match day, but there has to be a quick way to do it, or make it more engaging. As it is, it's just kind of in the middle. Neither quick enough to speed up the game, nor engaging enough to warrant the time you spend on it. And the harsh randomness seemed also unnecessary too. From the board meetings to the match consequences can really hamper your game. Hopefully you have some fans you can use for rerolls in those 2 times. So this game just ended up being a big disappointment for me. So I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. I so wanted to love this game, and I do love how they got the theme into this one, but I feel maybe the inherence of the theme may have gotten in the way of just making a good, solid all-around game. And with that, until next time, thanks for watching.